Good morning. It's Wednesday, April 15th. Our devotions are going through the book of Revelation. We're at the point now where Jesus is telling John what to write to the churches that were there at that time. But those churches represent the churches throughout history. It's just as relevant for the church today as it was back then. So we're going to look at the second church that he talks to and see if we can, and remember, when I talk about the church, you're Dresser, you're the church. I'm the church. We're all the church. So let's hear what he has to say to us. We're going to read from the second church, the church in Smyrna. So let me start reading at verse 8 of chapter 2. It says, "To the angel of the church in Smyrna write, these are the words of him who was the first and the last, who died and came to life again. I know your afflictions and your poverty, yet you are rich. I know the slander of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Do not be afraid of what you are about to suffer. I tell you, the devil will put some of you in prison to test you, and you will suffer persecution for 10 days. Be faithful, even to the point of death, and I will give you the crown of life. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. He who overcomes will not be hurt at all by the second death." I want to talk this morning about what he says here about though you are rich, or though you are poor, yet you are rich. And it's like, what does Jesus mean when he says, though you're poor, you are rich? What's he telling us today, his church? I know that many of you are poor. Our church Collision is helping out five families that live together in a small 2-bedroom, 1-bath house because of everything that's going on now. So you would say, well, they are poor, but are they poor? Let's look here. I'm going to read from James chapter 2, verse 5, where he says this, "Listen, my dear children, has not God chosen those who are poor in the eyes of the world to be rich in faith and to inherit the kingdom he promised to those who love him?" So those people, those five families I'm telling you about, may be poor in the eyes of the world, but yet rich in faith. Rich in faith. Now, I'm not going to name them, but boy, they're the ones that are watching the devotions constantly. Those are the ones that are raising their children up in the Lord, even though the children have to share bedrooms and beds and definitely a bathroom, yet they are strong in their faith. It's been proven that it's harder to reach a rich person than it is poor. And why? Because they feel like, well, I don't need Jesus. I have everything under control. We definitely see this in the in India, where they're really poor and they're desperate there, and it's amazing when the poor hear that there's going to be a crusade or a message or people that are going to talk about Jesus, they travel all day long, get there hours ahead of time to hear about Jesus. So poor seem to be more receptive to the gospel than the rich. Listen here in Luke. I'm going to read from Luke chapter 16. You all know the story of Lazarus and the rich man. Let me just read one of the verses here. It says, he's saying, but Abraham replied, "Son, remember that in your lifetime you received your good things, while Lazarus received bad things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony." Now, in the world, the rich man had everything. He had the estate. And the poor man, Lazarus, would lay by the gate, by the gate, begging for food. It says he begged for the crumbs that fell from the rich man's table. But the rich man ignored him every day, going in and just looked at him as trash. And then God says, to the rich, but you had everything in the world. The poor man had nothing, but now here he is in. So Lazarus didn't have any material things, but he had faith. He was rich in faith, where the other man was rich in material things, but poor in faith. Let me read 2 Corinthians 6:10, where he says this. Paul was talking about himself. He says he was sorrowful, yet always rejoicing. He was poor, yet making many rich, having nothing and yet possessing everything. Poor, but he made others rich. How did he make them rich? By showing telling them who Jesus was, and them accepting Jesus. Once you accept Jesus, you're rich. You're rich. Scripture says, what good does it do to gain the whole world, but forfeit your soul in the process? So if you consider yourself poor, comparing yourselves to those that have more, to those that have more material things, a bigger house, a nicer vehicle, nicer clothes, etc. But if you have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, then Scripture says you are richer than them if they don't have a relationship with Christ. You are richer than they are. It's interesting, the families that I'm talking about that don't have anything. They're the ones that are out there helping the poor. They're the one, Dandy, that doesn't have his own place to live. And those are the ones that are taking the little they have and they're going out there to feed the homeless. They're poor yet rich. What are you? What are you? Do you compare yourselves to others and consider yourself poor? They're poor, yet they're sharing what little they have. And I love how God works. Because Collision, I'll end with this, because Collision doesn't have any bills now, and yet offerings are still strong. Collision now is able to help those families. Those very families that were helping others. It's like what goes around comes around. You can't outgive God. God laid it on the heart of Collision to help those families, and we've been able to help them now. We're helping them with giving them money for food, but we're also helping them to teaching them how to apply for unemployment, teaching them how to what they need to do to get the stimulus package, all of that. God is blessing them richly. How about you? How about you? Do you look at what you don't have, or do you look at what you do have? And are you looking at how rich you are with your faith? Oh, be thankful. Be thankful for the faith that you have. But more than that, be willing to give what you have. Be willing to give what you have. If you're not willing to give what you have, then you're selfish. These families, the ones I just told you about, they don't, in comparison to most of us, they don't have anything. Imagine 9 of them living together. Four or five families living together in a little 2-bedroom house with children, and yet they're the ones out there feeding the homeless. What does that tell us? Hope God spoke to you this morning. See you tomorrow. Have a great day and stay safe.